What gets people to move is not the rational, it's the emotional. People trust people more than any form of marketing communication. When influencers create a catalyst, it begins to cascade through a network effect of people who see the world similarly. And that's culture in action, right? They see the world similarly because they experience the world, though different in context, the same in spirit. If we continue to think about people as a transactional sort of node, then we never get to the things that make us human. I think that that's been a thorn in our side as cultural creators since the beginning of time.
Today's episode dives into a profound truth. Storytelling isn't just a tool, it's the currency of culture. From ancient myths to modern marketing, the stories we share define who we are, what we value, and how we connect with others. Whether it's McDonald's transformation from a brand under fire to a fan-driven phenomenon, or how generative AI is opening new doors for creators while raising the stakes for impactful storytelling. Our guest today brings fascinating examples of how understanding culture can drive change and build loyalty. Welcome to Season 9 of The Great Indoors, where we explore the transformative role of storytelling in an era of generative AI. As technology shapes our culture and products, the risk of homogeneity looms large. This season will discuss how embracing unique narratives can counterbalance AI's influence, ensuring our stories retain depth, authenticity, and originality. Join us as we champion the human voice in the digital age. And I'm your host, Matthew Roberts, and as ever, I'm joined by my producer, the one and only Larissa Yee. So our guest today is Dr. Marcus Collins, and he's a fascinating gentleman and an award-winning marketeer, cultural translator, and author of the best-selling book For the Culture, The Power Behind What We Buy, What We Do, and Who We Want to Be. Now, Marcus has navigated a remarkable journey from engineering and music to creating strategies for iconic brands like Apple and Beyoncé. As a marketing professor at the Ross School of Business, University of Michigan, and the former chief strategy officer at Wieden and Kennedy, New York, Marcus has mastered the art of bridging academic insights with practical application. He's an inductee into the American Advertising Federation's Hall of Achievement, a Thinkers 50 Radar Distinguished Achievement Award winner, and a sought-after thought leader whose work continues to shape the future of business and culture. So in this episode, Marcus reveals how great marketeers are master storytellers, why understanding culture is the ultimate cheat code for influencing behavior, and how even the smallest story can spark a movement. If you've ever wondered how to make your message resonate or what really drives human behavior, this is the conversation you've been waiting for. So I'd like to welcome to Season 9 of The Great Indoors, Dr. Marcus Collins. I'd like to welcome our guest to today's episode on The Great Indoors, Mr. Marcus Collins. Marcus, welcome to The Great Indoors.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
As we discussed just before we started recording, the only place to be on this wintry morning is indoors anyway, right?
Typically, I would be the one bemoaning the weather, but considering you're in Canada, I think you beat me.
I think if you look at the weather patterns where you are in Ontario, it's very similar.
The Cognitive Association of Canada is always 10 degrees cooler.
So this is a new episode of The Great Indoors where we're going to be focused on weather patterns in the Great Lakes region. Thank you for joining us today, Marcus. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. And just for our listeners, take some time to introduce yourself, your history, and what you've been doing lately.
Thank you so much for the intro. I study culture and its influence and impact on human behavior. I sit with one foot in the world of marketing as a practitioner and one foot in the world of academia as a professor at the Ross School of Business, University of Michigan. But this is, in many ways, a new manifestation of how I've engaged with culture. Originally, I studied engineering, which is always the head scratcher. I studied materials engineering because I thought that polymers were cool. I would say they're interesting. I think that the mechanisms by which polymers come together, that is cool. And that I've taken with me across my career. It's sort of this idea that these carbon chains come together because of their affinity for electrons. These electron-loving entities come together to create new things as they combine to create these networked entities. And it's that sort of physics that informed my next chapter in my career from engineering into music. I love music, always loved music, and thought I was going to be either Michael Jackson when I was much younger. For a long time, my dream was to be the fifth member of Boyz II Men. That was what I was going after.
There's still a chance.
I keep all fingers and toes crossed. I've met the guys. Sean Stockton's my frat brother. There's still an opportunity. There's hope. But I went from this idea of wanting to be a performer to going into songwriting. I was writing love songs for a living. I wasn't terribly successful, but I was doing it. And the thing that I enjoyed and got the most out of music beyond its sort of hedonic benefit, I really gravitated to the fact that people would just come together around music. I won't even know you, but if you love Frank Ocean the way I love Frank Ocean, I feel connected to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd later find myself in music marketing, working at Apple, doing partner marketing for iTunes, managing our relationship with Nike Sports Music, to then running digital strategy for Beyonce, before moving over into advertising, which is really where the lion's share of my career sort of took root and created the trajectory that I've been on over the last 15 years or so. The idea there is the thing I like about advertising is not just the creation of things, which I definitely enjoy, but it's the fact that not only do you reach a ton of people, but you also amass a ton of people, much like music does and much like polymer chains do. Mm-hmm. And now here I am in this scholarly world, practicing, studying the mechanisms, the underlying physics of human behavior, which are predicated and manifested through networks.
Wow, that's amazing. I really like the way you summarize that, Marcus. And let's go back to the culture element. So you said you're a marketing practitioner, but you focus specifically on culture. Give us your definition of culture and how you look at different cultural groups, as it were.
Oh, yeah. Culture is one of those words that we often use but seldom fully understand. One famed cultural scholar named Raymond Williams was quoted saying that culture is one of the three most hardest words to define in the English language. It's abstract, it's ethereal, it's omnipresent, it's all around us. Mm-hmm. It's hard to touch. You can see it, but you can't hold it, which by nature makes it an esoteric concept. I think about culture through a sociological lens, particularly through a Durkheimian lens. Emil Durkheim, one of the founding fathers of sociology, talks about culture as a system of conventions and expectations that demarcate who we are and govern what people like us do. It's anchored in our identity. Because of who we are, we see the world a certain way, not because of what the things are, but because of who we are. That's why for some, a rug is decor, for others, it's a souvenir, and for some, the place of worship. These things are all mediated through our cultural lenses. We behave in the world the way we do, such that if for me, a rug is a place of worship, I don't wipe my feet off on the rugs, or at least this particular rug. And we express ourselves through shared work. The alchemy of these systems, or systems of systems, if you will, make up our culture. So when we think about different cultures, we're talking about many different systems. We think about these, whether they're subcultures, countercultures, popular cultures, organizational cultures, or religious cultures. These things are all different contexts by which we connect with people who are like us, people who subscribe to the same cultural subscription, see the world similarly, and behave accordingly. What we know about social groups is that when we no longer feel we identify or see the world the way these people do, we go, I don't know if I can identify by them as such, because we see the world differently. It's our ideological congruence that bring us together. It's what keeps us together, the covalent bonds that unite us with our people, but they also become the binary function, the rubric by which we decide whether we're one of them. And we see this fracturing happening, whether you're in a political environment, whether you're in an organizational environment, whether you're in a social environment, because culture is always present whenever humans come together. It's the governing operating system of humanity. And the better we understand it, the more likely we are to understand humanity as well.
And you've just made me think, Marcus, when you apply it, you're a marketing practitioner. One of the things in marketing that we do is segmentation. We segment the market. We look at those distinct groups. Are you saying here that the culture you identify with or that resonates with you is another form of segmentation, a more intelligent form of segmentation?
1,000,000 bajillion %. Segmentation, to your point, is the act of taking a heterogeneous group of people and putting them in homogeneous clusters. That's what segmentation is all about. The idea is that if we put people in homogeneous like clusters, then we can identify the people that are most likely to buy, to download, to watch, to vote, to subscribe, to take action. So the question becomes, all right, what is the best means by which we might divide this group of people so that we can identify the people that are most likely to move? Well, what is the most influential force on human behavior? It's culture. Therefore, culture becomes the best means by which we can segment the market. The challenge, of course, is that understanding people through their cultural lenses is difficult. That's why marketing is difficult. If it worked, everyone would be a great marketer. But instead, we rely on what's available, which is demographics. That's the way by which we typically segment people. We put them in boxes, not because they're real, but because these boxes are easy. They're not easy for us to better understand them. They're easy for us to better divide them. And the challenge there is that demographics do not show causality of what people are going to do, right? Like, what do all women have in common other than biology? And some would argue that maybe being a woman isn't defined by biology, right? What do all people with a college education do? Like, what do all Black people do? Now, wait for you to say something racist. It's ridiculous. Correct. Demographics are not the best way to describe people. But in the same breath, we'll go, well, how do we get those Gen Zs? This is a group of people defined by their age, and it's a 20-year age range. Tell me everybody between 18 and 38 are the same? That's ridiculous. And we know this intellectually, but it's what we always go back to. The idea then is that, well, we need a better way to segment people. And this is where savvy marketers go, of course, that's why we focus on psychographics. People's interests, their affinities, what they like to do, their passions are better ways to describe people and segment them than demographics, 1000%. But this is where the argument begins to unfold for me. What determines our interests, our affinities, our passions? Why do you like the food you like? Why do you like the music you like? Why do you like the clothes you like? Why do you like the aesthetic you like? These things are culturally influenced.
And also to your point is, how do you know what I like? I'm not going to publicize it as much. For example, say your affinity to a football team or even to a political group. People don't want to disclose that information that puts them in that cultural group for various different reasons. And to your other point, it got my head thinking of a meme I saw when we talk about traditional segmentation. It was King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne. If you look at they're born on the same day. They're both English. They both live in great big mansions. They both have the same amount of children. And it's like, hold on, is that the same? No, you couldn't get a further cluster of individuals.
And their royalty.
Yeah.
This is why it's wild. We stop and just sort of challenge the dominant logic. We go, oh man, this is actually quite flawed. And this is how I try to illuminate it for the CMOs I get to work with. I'm grateful and fortunate enough to work with Alex, who's a Gen Z demographic, Alex who likes to run, psychographic, or Alex who is a runner, identity.
Yeah.
Clearly the latter. That Alex is going to get up and run every single day. Why? Because people like them do something like this. That is sort of the rubric by which we decide what our behaviors are. And the more conspicuous our identity association is to these cultural subscriptions, the more likely we are to adhere to them, right? Erving Goffman, the sociologist, talked about this idea of presentation of self, where he famously used the theater as a metaphor for social living. It's borrowed from the William Shakespeare quote from his play, All the world's a stage and we are merely actors on it. And in Irving Guthman's estimation was that, we decide what character we want to play in the world, our social character. Because we adopt this character, we adopt the costumery, artifacts, mannerisms, behavior, and language, the script, right? These are the social facts of culture. Be careful what mask you put on, because what was once a mask may soon become your face. And that's how we are with our cultural subscriptions. Once we self-identify by it, we go, oh, this is who I am. And because of who I am, I have to vote this way, dress this way, act this way, date these kind of people, work at these kind of places, go on these kind of vacations, eat this kind of food. Every aspect of our social lives are influenced, dare I say, governed by our cultural subscription. And for marketers, I can't think of any greater cheat code with regards to understanding people and ultimately get people to move, which is the core function of marketing.
That's a fantastic definition, Marcus. I like the word cultural subscription, that, the culture that you subscribe to and identify to. Now, if we take this to the next level in the organizations that you work with, we talked as well about how traditional segmentation models flawed. How are some of the organizations you are working with adopting this in their marketing strategy? How are they identifying the cultural group that their consumer or enterprise base subscribe to? Sometimes it may be obvious, but sometimes less obvious. What are the mechanisms they're going through to determine that?
Duncan Watts put this famously perfect in my estimation. He says that the obvious is only obvious when someone points it out to you. McDonald's is probably one of the most celebrated case studies of this. Because what McDonald's demonstrates is not only an understanding of external culture, but it also was very intentional about its internal culture. For a good 10, 15 years, McDonald's was getting kicked in the teeth in the marketplace. The brand became the shortcut for everything wrong with the American diet, right? Movies like Super Size Me made McDonald's the perfect villain for the epidemic the country was facing with regards to hypertension, obesity, and the like. Fast food was the problem. McDonald's the biggest fast food player. They're the culprit. And McDonald's became the shortcut for everything wrong with the American diet. In fact, in 2014, there was a poll that voted McDonald's the most hated company in the country. Whew, bad news bears. So McDonald's came to Wieden+Kennedy, the agency I used to be the chief strategy officer in New York, at least. Chief strategy officer in New York, came to Wieden+Kennedy and said, hey, we're having an issue. People hate us. And, we go, yeah, they definitely hate you. But 68 million people show up at your door every single day. That's a lot of love. Why don't you focus on them? That statement wasn't as obvious to McDonald's. McDonald's was trying to fight the hate. They were trying to convince the haters that they were worth giving another shot. It's like, hey, we have apple slices to go with the Happy Meals instead of French fries. We're healthy. We serve salads now. We're healthy. And people are like, no, McDonald's, we're not buying it. But what we as an agency provided to McDonald's was to see the world a little differently. That is, to not think about consumers as machines. Instead, focus on the fans. Forget the haters. Focus on the people who love you. Yeah. Which required McDonald's understanding who those people are. Not their credit card data, but who they are as a community, as a group, as a cultural collective. So the team went out and did an ethnography, starting in Chicago, driving through the heartland of the country, talking to real life human beings who self-identify as fans of McDonald's. And this group of people transcended demography, age, race, gender, household income, geography, because they're traveling through the country, talking to all these different people who didn't know each other. Yet, they were saying the same things, same verbatims, without knowing each other. Why? Because they were a part of this living ecosystem known as a cultural community. And because of how they self-identify, their expectations, social facts. And we call those social facts fan truths.
Right.
They're specific, social in nature, and they're shared among people who self-identify as such. Right? Some of these fan truths may be obvious to many, but they're specific to people who are fans of McDonald's. For instance, your friend will ask for a fry even though they say they didn't want any fries. It's like, no, it's a bad truth, right? It's a bad truth. Or who doesn't eat the cheese stuck to the wrapper? If you don't, you're a monster because that cheese is amazing, right? These are all fan truths. But one fan truth rang louder than any of them. And it was this: no matter how big, how famous you are, everyone has an order. Everyone has an order. And it's like, that is so profound because here's a brand, arguably one of the most ubiquitous brands on the planet. And its ubiquity actually enables a sense of democratization such that you put 100 people in a room. One thing we have in common in our consumption is that everyone has tried McDonald's. And if you haven't, you go, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Because it's considered normal. Through this cultural convention, this social fact among these people, that McDonald's engaged their fans. And over a 4-year period, McDonald's saw double-digit growth year over year, quarter over quarter, moving from being the most hated brand in the country 10 years prior to being the most celebrated brand. Are counted among at Adweek as, one of the top brands on the world. And even Wall Street Journal said McDonald's is cool. We'll take it. In 2013, actually this time last year, Effie's awarded McDonald's the most effective marketing campaign on the planet. No new products. They were all just reframed through a cultural lens because of McDonald's intimacy and proximity to fans, not consumers, not demography, but fans.
So it's really interesting, Marcus, because we've had David Meerman Scott on this show a few times. His latest book is Fanocracy, and his marketing strategy is turn potential customers into fans of your brand and build a fanocracy around what you do, and they will engage with you. What McDonald's did was not try and find new fans and battle the hate. They identified their existing fanocracy and doubled down on that group rather than fighting the hate of the people that weren't.
That's right. I think about this, and in my book, I refer to them as congregations. I like the idea of congregations because those early scholars of sociology, they studied culture by observing religion. And we use so much religious language in marketing that just feels kind of fitting. We convert consumers and people evangelize. So thinking about our collective of people as congregations always seem like the right handle to talk about them. And we call them congregations because they all believe in a thing. They self-identify by a thing. And the notion there is that if you can activate your congregation, the collective of the willing, they go do the convincing for you. Now, why is that important? Because people trust people more than any form of marketing communications. People are more influenced by their people than anybody or anything else. Right? So what we're doing is leveraging the network effects that already happen within our social groups, but doing it with today's technology to accelerate the rate by which that happens and push the propagation even further. To your point, people who buy, not the people who self-identify as such, those people not only consume, but they'll use the brand as a way to project their own identity and then share with people who are just like them and so on.
Yeah. Now, and it's got me thinking now, because with marketing and most modern marketing, it's all about new customers, acquisition, new pipeline, growth, new.
Yeah.
To the point, even when you look at some of the big, say, service providers around the world, like Verizon or AT&T, and when they're trying to attract new customers away from their competitors, they'll sweeten that deal with a free iPhone or a 80-inch OLED television or all these things to try and acquire new customers.
Yeah.
But their existing customer base that is loyal to them, that buys into the brand, that spends $150 recurring every month with them, could feel largely ignored by these sweeteners that are given to these more fickle subscribers that are coming across. So there's a lesson there for marketeers. Would you say the lesson is take care of your fan base first before trying to acquire new fans? Is there a priority or?
I think that they're not binary, but your example is spot on in that if we treat newcomers, then we're basically saying it's better to have a transactional relationship with us than to be loyal. Relationships are costly because I have to constantly give. I'm constantly at a discounted rate to keep you. Think about this quantitatively. We talk about the customer lifetime value. When you do that calculation, that discounting calculation, it's based on retention rate and acquisition costs, right? If I am constantly in this hedonic treadmill of keeping people making, first it was like you get a first month free on your cell phone subscription to these phones, not the great phones, but these phones, we give it to you for free. Now, the hero phone, we're going to give it to you for free and give you this, that, and the third. Your acquisition costs are going through the roof over and over again in hopes that you sweeten this deal such that they come. But if you don't keep them, that acquisition cost is hurting you in the long run. Moreover, because we're not taking care of the people who have been here for a long time, we have to therefore contractually bound them, which only creates frustration. But if we treat the people who are already here amazing, what happens is that they go tell people how amazing you are. Now think of it this way. I run a TV spot that runs for 30 seconds, and maybe you catch 5 seconds of it. And it's trapped in the recesses of your brain in hopes that you recall it later on in the moment of truth, right? But juxtapose that with your friend who you talk to every day, who talks about you all the time because of how great the brand is. What do you think is more effective? Think about the movies we watch, the shows we watch. It's not because we saw an ad, it was like, ooh, I think I'm going to watch that show. That seems kind of interesting. And you go on with your life. But then when everybody's talking about the bear, you go, I guess I should be watching the bear. Why? Because everyone's doing it. That happens when we serve the people who are with us. They become walking billboards for us. The idea there is, it's not to be binary. They work better together. It takes two to make a thing go right, as Rob Bass, DJ Easy Rock once said. The notion there is that we create fireworks, get people's attention so they can see it, but we build campfires. We facilitate campfires that bring people around to stay. And those people help aid our fireworks by inviting people to the fold using the kind of credence that media would never achieve, that brands could never buy.
So that leads me beautifully into what we've talked about in this season of the podcast, storytelling. And it's really how storytelling will be affected, maybe aided, maybe devalued by the advent of generative AI. What are your thoughts on this, Marcus, as far as how does storytelling play into cultural marketing? And what are the ramifications of this new technical disruption that is getting a lot of airtime, as I'm pretty sure you're aware?
But stories have always been associated with culture. Stories are the currency of culture. They're the ways by which we socialize information and social facts, whether it be through religion. You learned about your religion through the stories you were told, through folklore, ways by which we teach morality, what the beliefs and ideologies are of people like us and what people like us do. Even urban legends, even gossip. These all become ways by which we socialize what's acceptable for people like us so that we're able to achieve social solidarity, collective effervescence. For marketers whose job is to influence behavior, leveraging the influence of culture to achieve that aim, storytelling is the way by which that's done. Not facts, but stories. We don't share facts, we share stories. In a world where there are more means by which stories, I don't think it undermines or diminishes the importance of stories. It instead heightens the threshold by which stories have to achieve to resonate with us. When we have greater expectations of a technology, of a practice, of a ritual, of a behavior, it raises the bar with regards to how people have to behave to reach that threshold. It's this hedonic treadmill that we're on. Eddie Murphy has this great bit from Raw.
I'm a big fan of it.
He's like, if someone's starving and you feed them crackers, they're gonna be like, oh my God, this is the best cracker I've ever had. Oh my God, this is cracker. This is a regular cracker. This is saltine? No, this is a Ritz cracker. It must be a Ritz cracker. It's so good. If you continue to feed them that cracker, after a while, they're gonna be like, this it? We humans have this ability to adapt to the situations in which we're in. That's both bad and good, right? If we're in a harsh situation, we're able to adapt to it. When we're in a good situation, we adapt to it also. It becomes boring. It becomes mundane. It becomes mediocre. And being sort of neophilic, we like familiarity, but we like some newness too. When we are in this cycle of more of the same thing, we go, oh, that's it. You got to do more now. Have the ads, the films, the music, the dances, the fashion that once used to strike our fancy 20 years ago, not going to cut it. Why? Because the expectations are higher. Technologies like AI will create a saturation of sorts that allows more people to create, to tell stories. We'll expect more from storytellers if they are to get our attention and ultimately resonate within our limbic system.
I think the originality, the authenticity, and the innovation of stories, like you said, over time, has to keep reinventing itself to capture people's attention, to be that differentiation without losing the familiarity. But something's just occurred to me with what you said, Marcus. Maybe it's that generative AI opens the door and enables new storytellers to come into the fold.
I think of it similarly with music. In the early 2000s, we started seeing the Napsters of the world, the LimeWires that allowed for peer-to-peer sharing. And while this distribution vehicle began to disrupt the music industry as we knew it, the real disruptor in my mind was the democratization of music creation.
Yeah, the creator.
People were able to record on their computers, and I could buy a fairly decent microphone for $100, record on my computer, and you can't tell the difference between my song and someone who recorded in a major studio. The democratized access of content creates saturation such that there is more supply than demand. And now there's a need for people to curate. Now there's a need for people to gatekeep so that I know where I should be pointing my attention because I only have a finite amount of it. So this technology creates a greater door by which people can create, but also upsets the industry's orthodoxies and creates a need for change, which the music industry is still trying to figure out some 20 plus years later, almost 30 years later. I think that and which is music being another form of storytelling, television, or just to say film, has always had a higher hurdle because our expectations for film were just greater. We're not great at the sonic fidelity of music. We don't go those high ends at 6 kilohertz. Nah, not good at recording. But we can watch a movie and go, this is terrible. If the film quality isn't great, it's terrible because there's a certain bar that we have expectations for. What the technology is doing is raising the floor closer to the bar where you can shoot a film on an iPhone. Good night. The megapixels in a Google Pixel, it's just amazing. It's such that they are rivaling and making parity bigger, more, fancier cameras. As a result, you bring more filmmakers in, more creators in, more storytellers in, and now you're going to get an upsetting of the industry, which we just saw with the strike last year, right? It's how it continues to play out. Generative AI will have the same sort of effect. You create more of a wider door of people to come in to create, and therefore the status quo, the orthodoxy will be changed. That's how all technology works. It extends human behavior, as Marshall McLuhan once said, extends human behavior that allows more people to do things that typically had a partition or had a barrier to entry that was too high for people to do,
Yeah.
Wheel extension of the foot, clothes extensions of the skin, glasses extension of the eyes, computer extensions of the brain. These technologies help us do this. I think about music again, my background's in music. There was a time where if you wanted drums in your song, you had to hire a drummer, a session musician. And that drummer would come in and drum, right? And get paid, and that'd be great. That was the orthodoxy. You had to have the musicians to play it until people started using drum machines around the time of disco, right? And now you have drum machines. I don't need a drummer. And drummers were like, what is this technology? This is not real. It doesn't have any life. But what it allowed people to do is that, well, I can't afford a drummer. I don't play drums, but I can still have drumming. That created a great opportunity for drummers to say, I'm going to embrace this technology because I know drumming better than anyone else. I know rhythm better than anyone else. I'm going to master this technology so that I could train you to increase the threshold by which good drumming in a song is expected. Instead, they pushed against it. And now mediocre non-drummers became really good drum programmers, and session musicians continue to erode. I think the storytelling mechanism, generative AI, might have the same effect. If storytellers aren't embracing the technology, they're going to be left behind by people who always wish that they could, who now can.
I think it's a really great analogy, the music in the Hollywood. And I think the statistic was YouTube is now the most popular channel or application on a TV, right? YouTube creates 300 million hours of original content a year, whether that's created by me, you, or Larissa. Hollywood creates 15,000 hours a year of content. So if 0.01% of that now YouTube created content is elevated by generative AI and comparable to Hollywood, then there's a big disruption staring us in the face. When you mentioned the strike, it was all predicated on generative AI, what it would do to Hollywood as the biggest disruption they could ever imagine.
It's like those business models make it almost impossible to compete. The argument that YouTube content doesn't look great and it's not professionally shot, it's not edited, but these folks like Mr. Beast, they are phenomenal. They're phenomenal editors. They're unbelievably creative, and they understand the way by which people consume content, as opposed to Hollywood, who said, we're the curators. We're going to tell you what to watch. We're going to tell you what's worth watching, such that we have the authority to do so. Providing agency for people to decide where there's actually more to choose from, that's becoming closer and closer to what was typically a craft difference challenge. And for marketers, similarly too. Marketers, advertisers in particular, would spend $500,000 on a commercial, on an ad, before you even have media behind it. $500,000 to $1 million to make this piece of content, to this film. And maybe 1 million people will see it at some point with media behind it, where folks are creating content where there's 1 million people waiting for it.
The barriers to entry come tumbling down. The democratization of people now have the ability, based on their life experiences and their authentic stories and the culture subscription that they identify with, now enter the market of storytelling and being able to distribute their stories via social media, via YouTube. Does this create more cultural subgroups?
Oh, yeah. And that's, I think, remember, technology merely extends human behavior, which asks the question, what is human behavior? Anthropologists argue that we weren't meant to be in these big metropolises or metropoli, whatever the plural of metropolis is. We weren't meant to be in these big gatherings. We're meant to be in clans and tribes and groups and communities and small villages. That's what we were wired for. Our prefrontal cortex can only handle so many social relationships. And we were wired to be in these small groups. So in the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, when people left their villages, their small hamlets, to go to the major city in an effort to participate in capitalism, to make money, they then had to find new communities, what Mefisoli referred to as neo-tribes. And how were those neo-tribes predicated? They're predicated on consumption. Like, oh, you're into this. I didn't hear that before. That's kind of cool. These are my people. I like Star Trek. I like the Beatles. I like this. I like that. These become my people. So to your point, with so much content being created and so many different expressions of tribal associations, they create, if you use the analogy of cable, hyper cable. It's not just like the fishing channel, it's the salmon channel. You know?
Yeah.
It gets really specific. And you go, great, that's how I like it. I'm not just a hip hop fan. I am a boom bap, native tongue, Tribe Called Quest hip hop fan. That's the kind of music I want to hear. And I think the canary in the coal mine is the music industry. Because look at Spotify. Look at the way Spotify slices the genres. It's not rock, it's yacht rock. It's not hip hop, it's lo-fi grooves hip hop. And again, very specific. And the more specific it is, the more people feel seen. And the more people feel like this is the thing for me. And I would argue that as the proliferation of content continues to propagate across the media landscape, there are more ways by which I can rabbit hole myself into my thing and find people who are more like me, not just an R&B fan, but you're a Frank Ocean fan. Oh, talk to me. Not just a 90s R&B fan, but a Boyz II Men fan. So the idea there is that when we find our people, we feel that much more connected because in our brains, it means we can trust them. It means safety. And our consumption at its core is a cultural act. And the technology is merely extending what has always been in us because of who we are and how we're wired.
So we talked about subcultures, cultures, democratization of storytelling to get to those cultures. Is the holy grail in marketing micro-segmentation, i.e., what I say to you, what I position to you, my message, my ad, my call to action is entirely specific to you? Because now I have the data, the understanding, the generative AI to create on the fly, in real time, the message that is going to resonate with you and only you, right? Is that the holy grail that as marketeers we aspire to achieve?
I think that was the argument of programmatic marketing. That we're going to get highly specific. You're going to see the message just for Marcus, uniquely for Marcus. While logically that makes sense, it ignores the fact that we are not individual agents in this world. We are social animals. And our worlds are culturally mediated through what's acceptable for people like me. I might like a thing. I loved R. Kelly's Trapped in the Closet. Loved it. Absolutely loved it, right? But I don't listen to R. Kelly, even though I still love this song. And a part of me, when it comes on the radio, I go, oh, I want to listen to it, but I can't. Why? Because socially, it is not acceptable to do such. Now, in my mind, I can separate the art from the man. And sometimes I do, I'll be honest. But when my wife's in the car, as soon as she hears his voice, she's like, cut it off, turn it off. We are social animals by nature. I would say the goal isn't hyper segmentation. That is a byproduct. The goal is intimacy, proximity, understanding us, understanding the underlying physics. It's about understanding the jobs to be done for people like me. Even Clay Christensen, God rest his soul, when he brought this idea of disruption, talked about understanding people's jobs to be done. And he says that there is a functional job, an emotional job, and a social job. The functional job is how the product performs. The emotional job is how I feel about the problem and how the product take care of the job. And the social job is how I'm seen by my people. If you don't buy brands and branded products, we hire solutions that get jobs done. If you remove the functional job, 2/3 of the equation has nothing to do with the product and how it affects me. It has everything to do with the sociological and psychological impulses that move me. These things are mediated based on culture. But we only understand that if we're close enough to understand it.
It's shared experiences as well. Using generative AI, I could produce a movie specific to you because I know everything you like. I can create a movie specific to you. But I think that is flawed. You may like the movie, but it's flawed because you cannot share that experience with anybody else. They would have never seen the same movie. You can't talk about it.
I can't, over the holidays, I can't be like, Larissa, have you seen the Snow Day? And you go, no, what's that? And I go, oh, it's a movie. Where can I see it? You can't because it's only for me. We connect over anything. What I watch, this is what we do. We come together. What do you watch? What do you listen to? Who did you see? Where did you go? If the experiences are all one of one, there is no socialization there. And we are, as Aristotle said, social animals by nature. Everything we do is about crashing into each other. And our experiences, to your point, are meant to be shared. And ergo, we feel connected as a result of it.
It's Charles Eisenstein that says, we've lived in a world of separation. The stories that are told are about separation, where we need to move towards a world of interconnectivity, because our existence as a society is based on those connections. And as soon as you take those connections away and focus on the individual and focus on separation, society falls apart. This feeds into that notion.
1,000,000%. I mean, look at the political landscape in the States. We're getting massive divides happening because people aren't sharing experiences. I see one thing, and you see something completely different. I go, how? Like, come on. And because we don't see it similar, we go, I can't rock with you, dude. I don't know about you. And as a result, we get polarization. And we see what that means for the institutions of government, but also society writ large.
We're coming towards the end, and there's a few more segments that I think we need to go through. But I just want to ask one question, and it's something that we ask every guest in this particular season. Can technology and generative AI ever replace humans when it comes to the genesis of storytelling?
No, I don't think so. Storytelling is a cultural act, and culture is too nuanced to be identified based on algorithms, to be predicted. I mean, that's what, it's basically just making predictions. AI today, at least. But humans' ability to make meaning and recontextualize is so nuanced. I don't think so.
But it goes back to your earlier point. You always have to add to the pre-existing stories. They have to get better. We have to raise the bar. And if you're relying wholly on generative AI for your storytelling, it's going to be homogenous.
That's right.
Yeah.
And since culture is always changing, we talk about Eddie Murphy. You watch Raw today, you go, whoa, Nelly. Whew, you clutch your pearls. Why? Because the cultural conventions, the social facts have shifted.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Look, this is brilliant, Marcus. We got two more segments I want to get into.
Okay.
And this segment is new to this season. It's called TGI Storytime. TGI Storytime. And I would like you to recount for our listeners a story that you have heard in your life that has had a profound impact on your trajectory in life. Now, that could be a novel you read, an ad you saw, a song you heard, a poem you read, something your grandfather told you, a story when you were cutting grass in beautiful horizontal lines. But if you have one, if you could tell that story that's had that impact on your life, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. It would have to be The Alchemist. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, but there's this reoccurring motif, this theme that, I'll paraphrase it, if you know what you want, the universe will conspire on your behalf. I think about that through my own cultural frames. If you know what you believe, if it's very salient on what you're after, if it's God's will for you, it'll happen. If it's not, the doors will close. And I've always looked at it through a religious lens growing up, as a church boy, choir boy. But seeing it through a secular lens became a driver for me professionally. That if this is what I want, and I'm very focused on it, and I know in my heart this is what I want, then the universe will conspire on my behalf. And that's a story I tell myself over and over again. One may call it sort of the source of my professional delusion, but at the core, it's that belief system that guides me. It's that story I tell myself. And it's because of The Alchemist.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. That's really good. And that's a story of positivity and hope, right? A story of optimism and what can be done if you really, when we've been speaking to guests about this, we've had a myriad of different stories. Some of despair, some of I don't want that to happen, or I would never want that to happen to me. But your story is opposite. It's, this is where I want to go. This is what I believe in. And if I am true to myself and go after it, then the universe will conspire to make it happen. That's right. Wonderful.
I mean, to me, it's a matter of faith. It's because of faith that we have hope.
Yeah.
Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, right? And by it, the elders gain a good report, right? So it's this idea of stepping out on a thing, not knowing what's there, but believing that it's possible that the universe will conspire on your behalf. I find seeing the world through that lens, one may say naive, I would say has been sort of the battery on my back in many ways.
That's perfect. Okay, so we have our final regular segment here. This is a fun quick fire round, Marcus, called TGI to go. Okay. I'm going to give you two options and you give me your favorite option based on your own preference. If you're ready, we'll close things down with TGI to go. TGI to go. Question number 1. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise, because it's all about the possibilities of the day.
Are you an early riser?
I am indeed.
Singing or dancing?
Ooh, the human voice is like the best instrument there is.
You're still interested in, you still produce music, right? That's a hobby of yours.
One of my COVID projects, I recorded an album with my then 5-year-old daughter that we put on Spotify, the whole nine. I'm actually the choir director at my church, so I'm still very much associated with music. And I think the voice is just unbelievable.
Can you do singing and dancing as a combo, or do you just want to focus on the one?
That's why Michael is the best, because he can do both in unmatched capacity.
Question 3. You're going to read a novel this evening. Would you read something from J.K. Rowling or from J.R.R. Tolkien?
Ooh, probably Tolkien. Yeah, I think that I'm not a very fantasy fiction kind of guy. So shout out to all things she's done, especially on the Harry Potter side. It's not really my cup of tea from a reading perspective.
I'm the same. Honestly, my children love all the Harry Potter books. For some reason, it doesn't resonate. It doesn't hit me. It's not in my cultural subscription, as it were, to get into J.K. And I don't know what it is. So I'm with you on that one, Mark.
I like the movies. The movies are fine. A fun fact is I exclusively read things in my maybe tangential things, but really it's all the behavioral sciences. It's all I read.
It's simple. When I'm looking for something to read, I'm the same. It has to be in association with what I'm doing. I can't remember the last time I read something fictitious.
To me, they're like empty calories. No shade. Everything I'm taking in, I need to be nourishing where I'm headed.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same. Okay, basketball or football? Talking American football here.
Yeah, basketball for sure.
Yeah. And your team is?
The Pistons. I'm a Pistons guy.
Okay. Yeah.
Through the good times and the bad. Lots of bad these days, but we're getting better. So I'm optimistic.
But the Lions have had a good season to date, right?
Lions have had an amazing, they're the best team in the league right now. They're great. Basketball has always been a game that has fascinated me far more than football has.
Now you could go to Los Angeles or New York for the weekend. Where would you head?
New York City.
Yeah.
Is there a city better than New York? Especially not in this country. I love the city. The city was so good to me. Spent quite a bit of time there. My eldest daughter was born there. New York fit me very well, and I like to go back. It's a second home in many ways.
And it's great this time of year, the festive feeling, the Christmas time.
I love the New York at this time of the year. It's cold, but not quite as cold as Michigan. The winter in New York is always a little delayed. It's like the end of January, February is when it gets bad. So you're sort of like a 2-month latency from where we are here in Michigan. Yeah.
Marcus, that concludes our TGI to go. Thank you for participating. That's always a nice bit of fun to end the discussion. The time has flown by. And for our listeners, Marcus, where can they find out more about you?
You can find me across the social web, my website, Mark to the C, MarcTothec.com, and Mark to the C across all the social sites.
And we'll put all those links in our show notes for our listeners. I just want to thank you, Marcus, for taking the time on this wintry, cold morning to join us on TGI. Do you have any last comments or remarks you would like to leave for our listener base before we close down today?
Well, I want to say thank you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. If I could just TLDR our conversation, it's just if we understand people not as the demographic box that we put them in, but as the cultural actors that they are, not only does it help us be better marketers from a practicing perspective, but I believe that it helps us be better people. I think it makes for a better society because we see people in all their complexity with the same kind of grace that we want people to see us.
Thank you very much, Marcus. We'll speak to you again soon. So that's a wrap for this episode 5, Season 9 of The Great Indoors. Thank you, Marcus, for joining us. It was incredible. I feel like we only got through half of the things I really wanted to talk about. So I'll put that on the record. That was part 1 of our conversation. I very much look forward to speaking to you again and concluding that talk because it was really wonderful. Check out links to Marcus's incredible work in the show notes. And for all updates on this season and all things The Great Indoors, visit us at amdocs.com/The Great Indoors. Now, I don't think it's too early to tell you as well, we will be back in Barcelona in just over a month. So we'll record Season 10 live from MWC 2025 in Barcelona. So stay tuned. And we'd love to have you a guest if you will be there. So with all that said, I'm Matthew Roberts from Amdocs in Toronto, and have a great day wherever you are.